So Shatrujeet is absolutely fine.
Sure. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session. Today we have Shatrujeet Nath with us. Shatrujeet Nath has sold ice creams, peddled computer training courses, written ad copy, and reported on business as a journalist and assistant editor at the Economic Times. While still at the top of his game, Shatrujeet quit journalism to write fiction. His first book, the Indo-Pak spy thriller, The Karachi Deception, was published in 2013. He then went on to write the national best-selling epic fantasy series Vikramaditya Veergatha, which compromises of 4 books: The Guardians of the Halala, The Conspiracy at Meru, The Vengeance of Indra, and The Wrath of the Hellfires. His latest book, Warlord of Ayodhya, Rebellion, is the first in the 3-volume alternative mythology series that tells the story of Bharat's 14-year rule over Ayodhya during the exile of Rama. Described as a new face to Indian mythology by DNA, Shatrujeet writes for movies and web shows as well. Welcome to this session, Shatrujeet. Thank you so much for sparing your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Namrata, and thanks all of you for turning up on a Sunday evening. So you've got a lot of better things to do, but you chose to do this. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll start with the first question. From your debut with Karachi Deception, The Guardians of Halala, which has been the best-selling series, the entire Vikramaditya Veergatha series, you've switched genres with brilliant ease. So can you share your experience doing that? Like, was there fear, apprehension, or was it born out of a pure desire to write that one story that consumed you at that moment?
Yeah, so it's actually quite fascinating because we are talking about Karachi Deception, and the Karachi Deception came out in 2013, yeah. And I'd actually signed my contract with the publisher at that time during Diwali of 2011, and it's just about a week ago that I actually signed another contract for the Karachi Deception with my current publisher. So my current publisher has now acquired that title after 9 years of being with a different publisher. So it's interesting that the journey is now a 9-year-old journey, and so we're talking about Karachi Deception. So yeah, I think Karachi Deception just came out of my desire to tell that story. I had that story in me for quite a long time, and in all honesty, I really didn't want to write a novel. I wanted to write a film script, which was Karachi Deception. I wanted to write it as a film, and I wanted to take it to Amir Khan and tell him that, this is my film, and why don't you act in it as my hero? That's really what I wanted to do. So when I started writing Karachi Deception, at that time, and this is 13 years ago, I had no idea as to how to write a script. I didn't know how to write a script or a screenplay. So what I knew was how to write a novel. I mean, I had read novels, so I just started writing what I thought was a screenplay, and I wrote some 40, 70, 80 pages, and then I realized that that's not a screenplay. I showed it to somebody, and that person looked at it and said, "This is not a screenplay." So I said, "What is it?" He said, "This is not a screenplay. I don't know what this is." Then I said, "Is this a novel?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, then let me write it as a novel," because that's all I knew. I didn't know what else to do. And then, of course, I wrote it as a novel. And then, of course, the book came out in 2013. And that's the end of it. I mean, I never went with it to Amir Khan, and none of that ever happened. But the good thing was at least I had a book at the end of it. So that's what Karachi Deception was about. And again, truth be told, once I finished writing the Karachi Deception, I didn't really know what to do next. It's not that I really planned my writing career at that point in time, but my publisher at that time, my first publisher for the Karachi Deception, he met me and he said, "Okay, so what next? What are you writing next?" I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Are you serious about being a novelist?" I said, "Yeah, I suppose so." So he said that if you're serious about being a novelist, you have to come out with a book at least once in 2 years. You can't come out with a book in 2019 and then come out with the book in 2024. You need books with greater regularity. And then at that time, so he said, "Why don't you write a sequel to the Karachi Deception?" Which is something which even today a lot of people talk about. They want a sequel to the book, and I'll come to why I don't have a sequel to that yet. But anyway, I said, "I don't have a sequel. I don't have a story for the Karachi Deception." He said, "Write something else, but you have to write." So at that point in time, I was exploring, mythology, and mythology is something that I've always loved. So I was exploring the idea of, Shiva and the halahal, and I was exploring the idea of doing something with Vikramaditya. And I kind of, put all of that together. And I know I make it sound as if I just put it together and it happened very easily. It never happens that easily. It took a long time. It probably took about 4 months of of thinking before I was finally able to arrive at the book series, which became the Vikramaditya Veergatha series. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there was any apprehension because I actually respond to stories. I don't respond to genres. So if you were to ask me, would I continue writing? I don't want to write mythology for the rest of my life. My first book was a contemporary spy thriller, The Karachi Deception. Then I did Vikramaditya Veergatha, which is mythology. My current series is also mythology. That's a different matter. But I know for a fact that I want to write contemporary psychological horror. I want to write satire. I want to write an action thriller. I want to write crime murder mysteries. So I want to do all of this, and I want to do it across genres. So that's really how the journey of getting into mythology happened. It was a story that was ripe at that point in time in my head, and I just told it. So, and that's the same thing with even with my latest Bharat series. It's an idea that I'd been kind of working on for the last 6 years. And at that time, I couldn't pursue that because I was still working on the Vikramaditya series. I think I'd written 2 books and I had to write 2 more. So I had to finish that series and then start Bharat. So now I've written book 1 of Bharat. I mean, that's out. I'm writing book 2 right now, and then there's 1 more after that. And hopefully once I'm done with that, I'll end up writing my psychological horror and all of that. So let's see where we go with that.
Sure, that sounds very interesting. So let's talk a bit about mythology as a genre in India. So do you think authors like Amish and Devdutt have changed the way we perceive mythology? Like seeing the number of mythological titles becoming bestsellers, would it be safe to say there is enough demand for it for writers to consider writing in this genre?
Right, right. I think before Devdutt and Amish, the name that we tend to kind of forget a lot, and I kind of think it's very important to acknowledge. See, mythology in India has always been big. Okay. And in fact, if one were to take the languages, whether it's Odia, Malayalam, Tamil, Marathi, Gujarati, whatever, you take the languages, we've always had a lot of mythological stories being told and retold. But it's in English that was not happening. And the renaissance that we're seeing now is essentially the mythological genre being told in English. And I think the person who really started that was, and he predates both Amish and Devdutt, is Ashok Banker.
Yeah.
So Ashok Banker is actually the one who started with the Prince of Ayodhya series. What he did, I think he was the one who really started telling mythological stories in English, in a way that was more contemporary, in a style that was more modern, and more in that sense more accessible to modern readers. So Ashok Banker really started it. But then, of course, then Amish happened, and I think Amish was the best thing that happened to the genre, because it really helped people understand that there are so many stories to be told, and there's so much excitement about mythology in India. So Amish, yes, Devdutt, yes, Ashwin Sanghi in his own way, though he doesn't really tell pure play mythology stories, but his stories are, there is a mythological construct to the stories. It's all about the past, and it's about stuff like that. So what Ashwin calls the Indic mythology, Indic series. So as Ashwin, definitely, you have Christopher Doyle, who's done work. You have Kavita Kane. Kavita Kane has done a lot of interesting work in mythology. You have Anand Neelakantan, who's done some really good work in mythology. So yes, I think all of us collectively, fortunately, yes, I've been able to do something with Vikramaditya Veergatha, and now with Warlord of Ayodhya. Hopefully that moves to the next level. But yes, I think the fact that there are so many mythological stories. See, we've had mythological stories forever. There are so many mythological stories, whether it's the Puranas, the Vedas, you can take any source, and there are just so many stories and so many versions of the same story that exist, that it's so rich. There is a lot of potential to tell those stories. A lot of those stories are untold. A lot of those stories are half told. So there is a lot of opportunity, and I think readers love it. So it's great. As I think mythology is a great space right now in India. It's the closest to fantasy in the Western world, and fantasy is a large genre in the Western world, as we know. So I think mythology is definitely, and as long as we tell interesting stories and we tell them nicely, I think it's a genre that will thrive. I think so.
Sure. So your entire Vikramaditya Veergatha series was not only loved, but it was one series where the readers chased the writer for the next part. I remember you were literally sent reminders on all social media platforms wherever you posted anything about it. So for someone like you who's not that active on social media, how did you go about promoting your books, and how did this happen? How do you think you reach the readers like this?
I think I'm moderately active on social media. It's not that I'm not active. I'm actually quite active on Facebook and now on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. Twitter, I mean, I'm there on Twitter, but I'm hardly there on Twitter because it's just that I find Twitter very toxic. It doesn't work for me at all. But I think what really helped Vikramaditya Veergatha in that sense was that, and this is the age-old thing in marketing that they say, word of mouth.
Yeah.
And I think word of mouth is such a powerful tool. Marketers always understand that no matter how much you spend, how much money you spend on advertising, on public relations, the least amount of money you spend is on word of mouth, and it's probably the most effective way of getting the word out.
True.
And I think that's really what helped for Vikramaditya Veergatha. The first book took some time because people were still, while they liked the idea, they did not really know what was happening in the universe. But I think by the time the second book came out, I think readers had really understood what this Vikramaditya world is about. They had understood the dynamics between Vikramaditya and the other characters, whether it's Kalidasa, whether it's his brother Vararuchi, his mother, his comatose wife. They'd begun to understand the world and the construct of the world and all the kind of what is going wrong for our hero. And I think from the second book onwards is when, as you said, the people, I had readers starting to pester me and send me mails. And it's also very interesting that just today one reader got in touch with me on Instagram and said, when is the next Bharat book going to come out? So I told her it's probably going to come out middle of next year. And I told her that I didn't realize that you had read the first book of the Bharat series. She said, no, I haven't read it. I've bought it, but I haven't read it. I'm waiting for all three books to come out and then I will read it together because I don't want it to be like Vikramaditya Veergatha, where I have to wait for 2 years to wait for them. So I'll buy all the books, but I'll read them. Once the last book comes out, all three I'll read in 2 weeks. I don't want to wait for 2 years and 3 years between books. So it's very fascinating that, that pester thing has started already with the Warlord series. But yes, I think what happens is that when we are able to, and that's the beauty of a good series, whether it's, even like, for example, with what Amish is doing with his Ramchandra series, or like Game of Thrones, for example, or even, whatever it is, when you have a good series going, people are curious and you want to know more. You want to know, how does this story resolve? How does this subplot resolve? All of that. So I think it's word of mouth. The fact that people liked the story, they loved the characters, they loved the dynamic between the characters and the amount of uncertainty that's built into the story, because that's really what it is. It's about, how is this going to resolve?
Right.
Vikramaditya and Kalidasa are the best of friends, and then something happens where they are torn apart and they become enemies. How are they going to resolve? What happens next? So it's just that, and that's really, I think, what all of it's the craft of storytelling. How do you kind of leave people at the edge of the cliff and at the edge of their seats and make them wait for your next book and series or whatever it is.
You're right. True. So as we discussed before also, we've seen you switching genres with brilliant ease and great results, so to speak. So, but this is not something that is usually recommended by publishers or literary agents. So how was your experience pitching your Vikramaditya series after Karachi Deception and getting it published? Like, would you recommend authors to do this? Was it easy?
Yes, I think there are two schools of thought in this, two very clear schools of thought. One school of thought says that you pick a genre and you stick to that genre.
Yeah.
So if you're a crime writer, write on crime. If you write spy thrillers, write spy thrillers. Or if you are writing fantasy, write fantasy. Don't try to get out of it. And I think the pro in that, and this is the pro in that, is that your reader knows what to expect from every book of yours, and your loyal reader base stays intact, because your loyal reader base knows there's a comfort level that you give your reader base. They know what to expect from your books. But if you switch genres, what can happen is that your loyal reader may not like that new genre. Like, for example, it doesn't matter how fascinating I might find an author. If he or she were to write a romance, I'll probably not read it, because romance is not a genre that I like. Okay. So, so the fear of losing out on your loyal reader base is, I think, that's one of the cons, which is why they kind of recommend that don't shift. But I think the pro, and I can kind of, you can argue this both ways, and there are pros on both sides and cons on both sides. The pro, okay, so the pro of sticking to your genre is you've got a dedicated loyal reader base that you can constantly bank on for sales, support, all of that. They really become your mouthpieces, right? And the con is obviously the fact that you could lose out on your reader base. The con also is that maybe you're very competent as a crime writer. Maybe you're not as competent as a fantasy writer. Maybe you're not as these are two very different genres. The demands and diktats of each genre are very different from one another.
Right.
So I think those are some of the cons. But the pro in terms of when it comes to shifting genres is that I think for a writer, it's very liberating because after some time there's a certain fatigue that sets in when you write a particular genre. And I think you can see that with virtually every author who writes a particular genre over a period of time. You'll figure out that there is a formula because that's the nature of that genre. And that can be quite, after some time, it can be quite a burden for the writer because there's nothing new. You know what to write in mythology, you know what to write in fantasy. But suddenly, if you're asked to write a spy thriller, oh my God, okay, how am I going to do this? I'm going to write a contemporary spy thriller. How am I going to do this? So you've got to reorient your storytelling skills, your research skills, all of that. So I think that's one of the good things. It keeps you fresh. I think from the point of honing your craft, from becoming a better storyteller, I think it helps. I think it also helps from the pro point of view, being that, there is always the threat of losing out some of your loyal base. But there's the opportunity of finding readers in that genre.
True.
Who might then discover you and realize that they like the other stuff that you have done. And if you had never done that genre, they would probably have never discovered your older books.
True.
So that's also a pro. So as I said, there are pros and cons in both. I personally would be very happy working across genres, as I said, because again, as I said, like Steven Spielberg does a Schindler's List. He does an Indiana Jones. He does, they do so many different things. Same with Ridley Scott. They do so many different kinds of genres and so many, they do comedies and they do tragedies, everything, and everything's fine. So we don't question them. You have told Indiana Jones, why are you doing Schindler's List? Nobody asked Spielberg that. I'm sure they do. I'm sure there were people who have asked Spielberg that question. But he went ahead and did that, right? So I think even with authors, they must have the freedom to do that. Whether they want to do it or not want to do it, it's their choice. Like I know a lot of authors, they're very clear that they do not want to step out of their comfort genre. They're very happy doing that. And I think that's absolutely fair. As long as you're happy and your readers are happy, how does it matter what your genre is?
Very true. Very well said. So I believe you're not a full-time writer. You have a full-time job while writing continues on the side.
No, I am a full-time writer and that is my job. I write full-time.
Oh, so you quit your job? Last time when we spoke, I think you were working at that time.
I quit my job in 2009.
Okay.
2009, and ever since then, I've just been writing. So, okay, let me rephrase this. I've been writing since my 1990s. I was writing I was in advertising. I was a writer. I was a copywriter.
Okay.
And then in journalism, I was also a writer because I used to write business stories. So I've been writing since the mid-90s, but I quit a steady monthly job in 2009 to write fiction. And I must also say that I learned that late. It's probably not the wisest thing to do. It is not a good idea. So I would always tell people, don't junk your job. If you've got a paying job, don't junk it and pursue your passion, because very honestly, the first 3-4 years of our life was quite difficult after my decision to quit, because suddenly our household income was down by half.
Right.
And yes, I could never have pulled it off without my wife's support, emotional, financial, all of that. But it took me 5 years to kind of, build back my writing creds. People read my books. Then I started getting offers to write film scripts, consult on film scripts, shows, all that stuff. So that's where I get my money. That's where, writing books.
So you are practicing freelancing consultancy. That's what.
Yes. Yeah. So I write, when I say I write for movies and shows, I consult with them. And so there is a fee. So that's really where I make my money, because honestly, writing books does not make you money in India. It doesn't make you money virtually anywhere in the world. You need to have a steady paying job. Without that, I mean, there's no way. So even if you were to ask the biggest writer in the US or the UK, he or she's going to say the same thing. Don't quit that job, because you it's not that you don't make money. It's just that you can't sustain a lifestyle with that money.
Yeah.
So you need to supplement that. As I said, it took me 4 or 5 years to start supplementing that with what I'm earning right now. And once you get to this stage, then it's comfortable. So today, once again, I'm in a very comfortable space. But it took me those 4 or 5 years were not nice. I must tell you that. So just be warned.
What would be your tips for writers who want to pursue this full-time writing?
Don't quit your job.
Okay.
Definitely don't quit your job. Don't quit your full-time job. No. What would be my tips? Okay. I'm assuming, and pardon me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that a lot of you. Okay, let me very quickly ask this question. Are there any published authors in this group? Anyone who's published a book anywhere in this group? I'm just curious. Are there any?
Yeah, we do have, like we had, I don't know if she's attending the session. We have Priya.
Okay.
Yeah, Hadela, she recently released her book, Ladies Tailor by HarperCollins. Then there is Smita who said yes. Then there is Radhika who said yes. There are many. Yeah, Manish has also published his book.
Okay, is this Radhika Meghnadhan?
Yeah.
Okay, hi Radhika, hi. So I'll talk to you separately. Hi. So Radhika and I, hey, thanks. I saw her message. Yeah. So Radhika and I, we met in some lit fests and stuff like that. So yeah, I haven't met Radhika in ages. I haven't met anyone in ages because of the pandemic. No one has met anyone. So yeah. So I think this is going to be a difficult question to answer, because it's always easy when nobody has written a book, then there's one answer. But if some people have written a book, then the answer kind of changes a little bit. So it's a little tough to answer this question, but I'm going to go with the thing that, there are fewer people who have written and there are more people who haven't written. So I think the first thing that I would say is that, whatever you pick your first story to tell, that first book or whatever it is that you want to tell, make sure that, you absolutely love that story. And I'll tell you why I think it's so important. What happens is that when we set out to write our first book, and, it's so, because it's, writing, and we all know that it's such a lonely journey. There's no one to kind of tell us that we are doing the right thing. The book is going to get published. It's going to get sold. There's no proof of anything, right? It's not even like a painting that you can put up on your wall. Like, even if no one buys your painting, you can still, paint a painting and put it up on your wall. You can't do that with a manuscript, right? So it's a very lonely process, and it's very easy to get disillusioned during the process of writing. Especially your first book, because you don't really know whether you're getting it right, wrong, are you on the right track? And I think platforms like yours actually help a lot in that, because there's support, you are talking to other writers and all of that. But again, going back to the fact that when you absolutely love the story that you want to tell, when you're passionate about it, I think that passion really carries you forward. So, because when you write a story, you could be writing it for anywhere from, 3 to 6 months to 8 months, you could be writing that story. You've got to sustain your interest in telling that story for that long a period of time. It's not like a short story, right? And I'm not rubbishing a short story. I'm not saying it's easy writing a short story, but a short story demands only that much of your time. While a novel might, for 8 months, you have to be focused and write on that one theme or story, characters, plot. It's the same thing. So what happens is that you have to pick a story that you absolutely love and you really want to tell that, because that is what is going to give you that momentum to complete that story. So that's one thing, definitely. The second is, I think you just have to, as one of my favorite things is that, some days the muse does not show up, and on those days specifically, the writer must. So, it's very easy to assume that I am waiting for inspiration. Inspiration comes only when you come to the table. Inspiration is not there before you. You have to sit and work for 3 days. At the 4th day, inspiration comes in, because now you have worked for 4 days. So I think the whole point is that, this is it needs us to kind of motivate ourselves to go back, sit down, open our word processors, computers, desktops, whatever it is, and write every day, whatever it is, whether it's every day, whatever discipline that you're following. That's the second most important thing. That always set a discipline. If you're saying I'll write every day, you decide when is it, 6 to 7 in the morning, or evening 9:30 to 10:30. Or you say, I can't write during the week, I can write only weekends. Okay, weekends, Saturday and Sunday morning, 9 to 2 o'clock. So whatever it is, you decide, but then stick to that discipline, because then that becomes your time to write. And over a period of time, when you sit down at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, your mind is already working and you're able to tell that story. So discipline is important, motivation. You've got to motivate yourself to do it. Nobody else does that. I mean, your wife and your parents and all can tell you, go do it, we believe in you. But ultimately you have to believe in you to go and do it, right?
Right.
So I think, yeah, that's what is important, because, and all these are important for the first book, because from the second book, there is, you've done it once. So there's more, you have a sense of how to do it. You've got readers who are giving you feedback, telling you they liked your book. Some might be telling you they don't like your book. It doesn't matter, whatever, but at least you've got, that, your effort that you put in for 6 months or whatever the amount of time you put in, that effort has a payoff.
Yeah.
So second book onwards, it gets a little easier, but the first book is like, it's just shooting in the dark and you have no idea is there even a target in the dark out there, or is it just a black hole? But faith. So have faith in yourself. Yeah, that's it.
Sure. Thank you so much. That's been very helpful. Now we open it to questions. I think we already have some questions here. Okay. Smita Bhattacharya wants to ask, what is your writing process like from idea conception to execution? And who are in your community that help you in your process? Editor, alpha and beta reader, etc.
Okay. This is a good question, tough question, because, okay, so what I do is I've got one thing called what we've got an idea bank. So I've got an Excel sheet.
Right.
Where, whenever something strikes me as, could be interesting, I just put it down. You could put it down in a word processor. You could put it down anywhere. I put it in an Excel sheet. I don't know why, but I put it down there. And what I do is that, so that's my base for all kinds of ideas. Now, I also know, so right now that data bank is almost close to about 100 ideas. Now, I also know that probably out of those 100 ideas, 85 are never going to see the light of day. Okay. Now, among the remaining 15, how many of them are actually story ideas? I don't know. It's possible that some of them are story ideas. Some of them are not story ideas. They are subplot ideas. Okay. They're not big enough to become plots. But in a larger plot, they could be a secondary plot or a tertiary plot.
Right.
So what I do is that when I very often look at that my story bank, and I try and figure out, is there something from this that I can use? So if I'm working on the Warlord of Ayodhya right now, I might look at my secondary plot and my idea bank and say, is there something I can take from this which can become a subplot in this larger story? Sometimes that's good enough. Okay, you've got an idea that dovetails nicely with the larger plot, and that's fantastic for you, because it's also an idea that you've thought about. So as I said, so I've got this large idea bank. What I do is that once I know what my large story is going to be, what I do is I put down my fundamental story beats. And when I mean by fundamental story beats, I'm like, okay, any story you take, whether it's the Iliad, it's Ramayana, Mahabharata, Schindler's List, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, whatever it is, okay, Devdas, it doesn't matter. If you were to go back to a reader or a viewer and say, tell me what are the 5 most important things that happened in that story, 9 out of 10, all readers will tell you what those 5 or 6, 7 important things happened. So if the Ramayana, what happens in the Ramayana? Well, what happens is first Ram gets exiled. And then what happens? And then Ram goes into exile. And then what happens is that there is one Shurpanakha comes and she tries to seduce Ram. And then what happens is that her nose is cut off. And then Sita is kidnapped. And after Sita is kidnapped, the Ram meets the monkeys, they go to Lanka, they kill Ravan and finish. That's the story. The broad beats of the story are exile, Shurpanakha, kidnapping of Sita, meeting with the monkeys, war of Lanka. This is the broad, these are the broad pillars of that story. If you take the Mahabharata, you take any story, there are those fundamental pillars on which that story stands. So what I do is I decide what those pillars of my story will be, which are the fundamentals that without this, the story does not move forward. These are the main fundamental plot ideas. And these have to happen for the story to go from point A to point Z. So I chart those out in whatever sequence. They might not necessarily be in that sequence. They could be, I might decide and I could later rejig it. But I must know what those fundamental plots are. Why is this story happening? Where does it begin? What is the middle? What is the, whatever it is, you could turn around and call it an act structure. I don't know what you might call it, but it's basically what are the fundamental beats of your story. That's the second thing I do. Once I've got those in place, I start playing with character. What is this character? What is his or her? What are their motivations? And I start playing with, I take one character and I say, okay, what are her motivations? And I start taking another character and saying, okay, how do I get these two characters to clash on the fundamentals of this story that I have built? What are the conflicts between these characters? Because conflicts again take story forward. So the moment you have conflict, every time in a story you get stuck, the moment you create conflict, you've immediately got. So it's as simple as that. There are 5 people in a room. They agree that it's very hot. There is no story in that. 5 people in a room, 4 say it's so hot today. The 5th one says, are you guys mad? It's so cold. You've got conflict. Because now they're going to fight over, what should be the temperature of the air conditioner. It's as simple as that. You've got conflict. So conflict is what it takes stories forward, by and large. Okay. So I use that. I take character motivations and put those motivations at cross purposes with other characters' motivations. That's what I do. And then I take subplots. Now what I've got is I've got story, I've got structure, I've got those fundamental building blocks, I've got character motivations and interplay of that, and subplots. Now put all of this together and figure out how my story is. So usually I will do a rough synopsis of about anywhere from 12 to 25 pages of what will broadly happen in this story. And it need not necessarily happen that way. It can change. That's fine. It can change. Like, for example, in Warlord of Ayodhya, in my first book, there were things in the first book which almost 10,000 words worth of content I have removed from the first book and I've shifted it to the second book. So I'd written it, but then I realized that it fits better in the second rather than the first. And that's okay. You can do that. You can always chop and change. But when you have that structure and that interplay in place, you know what your first chapter is likely to be. You know why you're telling the story. When you write about your hero, you already know what are the kind of problems my hero is going to face. What are the problems my heroine, my lead character is going to face. When I introduce my negative character, I know what my negative character wants and how he is going to create problems for my hero. So I think that's what I do. And then I start writing the story. It's about, and of course, if there's research involved, that's a different matter. So research is all actually part of the building of the story. So sometimes, of course, there's also research that you do as you're writing the story. But if your story is based on things that require research, so for example, I'm not a doctor, and if I were tomorrow to write on let's suppose a new cure for cancer, I have no idea about cancer or cure. So obviously I've got to do some amount of research. I need to talk to oncologists. I need to speak to doctors, patients, cancer patients, all of that. So that's my research, which I will need to do before I even start putting a story in place. So research is also there. So I think that's it. It's research, structure, characters, subplots, and then put them all together and hope for the best.
Okay. So you have a compliment here. Sai has said you should actually start teaching. The way you say it, one is pushed to write. Thank you very much for this detailed answer.
Thank you. Who's this?
Sai.
Okay, Sai. Thank you, Sai. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next question we have from Sachin. Hi, Shatrujeet sir. Would love to get insights into your writing process. For example, your massive epic fight scene in the Vikramaditya series are absolutely kick-ass. What was your inspiration?
Yes, Sachin. Yes, Sachin. I think we are on touch on Instagram. I think so. So thanks, Sachin. Thanks for joining in. And yeah, so I think one of the things that happened when I said, okay, I think, okay, very important. Sorry, Sachin, I think there's one thing in Smita's question which I forgot to answer. Beta readers.
Yeah.
Beta readers, I think, and I think Sachin's answer, the answer to Sachin will kind of explain the importance of beta readers. I cannot highlight the importance more. I think beta readers are very, very critical to the feedback process. I always send out my books to beta readers, but you must also be very careful who you send it out to. Do not send it out to people who love you and will say it was great because they want to motivate you. No, you do not want motivation at that time. Your beta reader has to tell you this is the worst thing I've ever read. That is what is going to help you. Okay, so don't pick beta readers because they are going to be nice to you. Pick beta readers because they're going to be honest with you and they're going to tell you what they really thought about the book. That's really going to help you, and it's helped me. It's helped me tremendously in Veergatha, and I'll answer Sachin's question there. It's helped me a lot in Warlord of Ayodhya, where I had 3 or 4 beta readers come back to me with a point, and honestly, I did not understand what the point was till the 4th beta reader actually told me what the point was, and I understood that they were all making the same point. And I realized that, and it was so helpful for me because it helped me effective. I had to actually make revisions of almost about 15% of my story. I had to revise. Basically, I had to work on my lead character. So that's how important a beta reader is. So definitely beta readers, pick people who are honest, pick people who read that genre. That's the second most important thing. Because there's no point in my sending a crime thriller to someone who reads only romance. I mean, that person might read my book and love it, but they have no frame of reference. They will not be able to tell me that, Shatrujeet, this is such a cliched idea because I've read 6 romance exactly like this.
Right.
I need to send it to a reader who reads crime. They'll tell me, everything is great, but this ending, I've seen this in 2 other books. Now I know I have a problem. Okay, I've got to change the ending. So that's why it's important. Now, to answer specific Sachin's question, so beta readers, and this is connected to beta readers. So one of the things I do is that I have a friend of mine. We are very good friends. We go back to our days in journalism. So Ravi, who was my colleague at the Economic Times, I have tremendous respect for him. He's a great reader. He's a voracious reader, and I always, he's played a big part in driving me into writing. So whenever I write a manuscript, I always send it to Ravi. And when I sent the first Guardians of the Hala, the first book, the manuscript, Ravi came back with a lot of feedback, and Ravi's feedback always tends to be 6-7 pages of feedback. He's got a lot to say about everything. One of the things that Ravi said, he loved the book and all of that, but one of the things he said, Shatru, your battle scenes are very, very weak. And I was like, I thought I'd done a very good job with my battle scenes. So when Ravi told me my battle scenes are very weak, I was obviously, no one likes to hear bad things said about your work. So I became defensive. I said that, no, I've done this and look at the battle scene. He said, no, when you do epic fantasy battles, your battles need to be large. We need to see them large. So I didn't say anything. And then of course I went back to Vikramaditya book 1. I added battle sequences, scenes, all of that. And I really read a lot of fantasy battle sequences. I went back to them. I watched a lot of battle sequences in movies, for example, and just said that let me invest my time in learning how to write battle sequences. I did that. My book, the first book, The Guardians of the Halala, came out. Then I wrote my second book, which was The Conspiracy at Meru. And I sent the beta to Ravi. So this is almost a year and a half, 2 years later. I sent it to Ravi, the manuscript of the second book. And one of the first things that Ravi replies in his beta feedback to Conspiracy at Meru is, he says, Shatru, your battle scenes are super fantastic. So my point here was that, that criticism, I took so much to heart that I said, I'm going to make sure I get my battle scenes right. I'm going to make them work so fine. No, I don't know whether I've succeeded or failed. I think I have. I have a lot of readers who just completely love my battle sequences, but I also have readers who tell me that my battle sequences are very long. And they say, some of them say that, yeah, you don't need to write, 2 pages of battle scenes. 2 paras is also good enough. So, again, as I said, there are different types of readers. There are readers who love. So, but yeah, that's to answer your question, Sachin. That's how I have got into writing my battle sequences. So it's all beta reader feedback.
Yeah, Sagar wants to ask you, how do you balance your paying job and your writing?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult, Sagar. And in fact, very honestly, again, today, another very close reader. I mean, now a lot of my readers are my, and a lot of my reader friends have become friends amongst themselves, which is also fabulous. So it's very, very fascinating. So I have this reader friend in Pune called Aditya. So in fact, just today he messaged me and he asked me, how's book 2 going? And I told him slow because the truth is that yes, it's always difficult because when you take money from someone and then you've kind of committed your time to that person, and then by default you know that your time is more, you tend to spend more time for that person's requirements rather than your own writing. It is difficult, but yes, it ultimately has to be done. I know I have to do it. I have to write my next book and I have to find the time for it. Very difficult, but I think, as I said, discipline. If you're able to decide how to play with that time and make sure that, even if it means only 6 hours a week for your own writing, as long as you are able to give those 6 hours, I think that's good enough. Because even if you've written 6 pages in those 6 hours, it's 6 pages more than what you had 6 hours ago. So that's also good. It's slow, but it's better than not moving on. So
Sure. I will now club questions because some of them are actually getting repeated, asked by different people. So one is on your research. A lot of people have actually asked, how do you research for mythology and how do you, fish out your characters and how do you actually approach a multi-book story? Do you know beforehand that you will have to write many books or you'll be able to finish it in one book? So
we need to have a workshop on this one.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it is very complex. No, I completely get this because it genuinely is very complex. But okay, let me try and answer this as simply as possible. We can always think about a workshop some other time, and I don't know. But anyway, so let's first talk about the research process. So what I do is, my first thing is, first I look at the story. Okay, because the story itself should be waiting for me to spend time researching it. If I'm not excited about the story, why even spend time researching it, right? Okay, I might also be wrong. Sometimes, the research throws up gems which kind of tell you, yeah, wow, this is actually a good story worth doing. And that also has happened to me. But fundamentally, you must know that, this is a story that excites me. I want to tell this story. So both with Vikramaditya Veergatha and with Warlord of Ayodhya, which are my mythological epics in that sense, with Vikramaditya, the moment I knew that my story was about Vikramaditya and the Navaratnas as a band of superheroes, and I knew that their job is to protect the Halahal from the Devas and the Asuras, I immediately knew this is not one book. I mean, the scale of what I'm talking about, I've got the Devas, I've got the Asuras, I've got Vikramaditya and his Navaratnas as a band of superheroes, and they're going to fight the Devas and the Asuras. For me, I already knew that this can't be one book. Oh, it can be one book, but it'll probably be 1,200 words long. I mean, this fat a book, which is, so the simpler thing is to, break it into 3 books and it becomes a trilogy. So initially, Veergatha was a trilogy. So, so I think that's how I kind of, so the same thing with the Warlord of Ayodhya. When I saw and I realized I wanted to tell the story of Bharat during the exile of Ram. So we all know the story of the Ramayana, and we know that Ram and Lakshman and Sita went into exile, and we know what happened to them, but we don't know what happened in Ayodhya during the same 14 years. And when I started doing research, I found out that there is really nothing out there, because the Ramayana focuses on Ram and Lakshman and Sita, and nobody focuses on her. So I said, okay, I have an opportunity to tell a story of those same 14 years, which is fiction. So the moment I said that, yes, I see that as an opportunity, I saw 14 years and I said, I can definitely do 3 books, because it's 14 years and that's a really long period of time. So I think that's how I kind of make a rough estimate. Again, I can be totally wrong, because as I said, with Vikramaditya Veergatha, I started with 3 books. But by the time I ended book 2, I realized there's no way I could finish the third book, the story in 3 books. I needed 4 books. So I actually wrote them in 4 books. So I was wrong in that sense. So yeah, so that's how it is. In terms of research, it's just so there is some amount of research that I do in terms of, just knowing what's right for the story. So, for example, and I'll use Warlord of Ayodhya as an example. So my research was that, okay, in Warlord of Ayodhya, if I'm going to tell the story of Bharat and Shatrughna in Ayodhya, I first started finding out if there was already any existing material on those 14 years. And I found out that there is none. So I said that I knew that I had to make up this whole story myself. There are characters in the story. Then I started researching, the Uttarakhand. And I started looking at Uttarakhand, I started looking at the Ramayana. And I realized that, for example, and we all know that Bharat, for example, was not really born and brought up in Ayodhya. He spent most of his time at his mother's kingdom, which was in KKR, which is probably modern day Punjab, right? So I said, okay, who was in KKR? And then I discovered that Bharat's mother had a younger brother called Yuddhajit. So I said, okay, Yuddhajit now can be a character. I figured out that Bharat's grandfather's name was Ashwapati. I said, okay, Ashwapati can be a character in the story. Then I said, okay, if Bharat is there and if Mandavi, so I said that, okay, Sita is there, Urmila is going to be in Ayodhya. Urmila's father is Janak, which means Janak will be a character. Then I said, who is Bharat's wife? So Bharat and Shatrughna's wives are Mandavi and Shrutakirti. So I said, who's their father? It is Janak's brother, Kshiradhwaja. So I said, okay, he'll be a character. The whole point was, okay, how do you bring these characters into the story? What are the roles that you give them? And then I read somewhere that, during Bharat's, sometime during the phase of the Ramayana, Bharat defeats a king called Sailusha. And this happens somewhere in KKR. So I said, okay, Sailusha is going to be a character. There is no context to it anywhere. So I said, Sailusha is going to be a character whom Bharat is going to defeat in my story. How it will happen is my decision, and that's part of my story. So I think that's what I took some of the research, and then I figured out, okay, how do I that's the plotting where you put, the fundamentals in place and all of that. So I think that's where it is. Then there is obviously continuing research as you're writing the story. So I'm writing the story, and then I realized that, what was the kind of, at that time, did bridges exist in the Ramayana? Did people trade in currency? Did currency exist or didn't it exist? Now, this is an interesting point to debate. For example, what were the other kingdoms around the time of the Ramayana in India at that point in time? So, these are all secondary research that keeps happening as what are the kind of, so you want to use, so one of the things I learned was that during the time of the Ramayana, there is, and I'm not sure if it's Ramayana or the Mahabharata, but apparently in Gandhara, the capital of Gandhara is a place called Kapisi. Actually, it was very famous for a form of wine, which was called Kapisi Madhu, which I thought was very fabulous as an idea that, Kapisi Madhu was a form of wine which was very popular at that time. So I decided that, Kapisi Madhu would be something that they would trade in. Now, this is something I just got out of secondary research. It's not that I went looking for, but I think that's what research is all about. Try and you see what you research and see what you can use in your story, which makes it interesting, stuff like that. So that's really what research is. I think it's ongoing, and the important thing is to figure out what you research and how you use what you found.
Right. I am sorry, there are too many questions, but I think that I'll now have to choose the questions which I share. One I think is very interesting, and that has been shared by Radhika. So she wants to know about your experience adapting for the screen. Like, was it rewarding? Was it challenging? How do writers work in the film industry? I've heard that it's not always a bed of roses. So any words of wisdom for those hoping to break into screenwriting or OTT?
Yes, nothing is a bed of roses. It just pays a lot better. So I think that's That's one of the positives. I must put it out there. I think that's one of the reasons why I do it. And no, I think, yeah, that's one of the reasons. Okay, to answer your question, yes, I think that writing a screenplay and writing a book are very, very fundamentally different things. They're two completely different animals. The way I kind of look at it, and uh, I see the book, and I'll use the word manuscript, not the book which comes out printed, but the manuscript that you send to a publisher. I see the manuscript as the final product. This is the product which will ultimately come out as the book.
Right.
The film script or screenplay is the starting point, as opposed to the final product. Because what happens is that when you write the manuscript for a book, out of 10, even after an editor and a publisher go through it, and there is a lot of chopping and changing, it fundamentally does not change much. Also, it's still your vision. At least I'm hoping, if you're a good author, it's still your vision, and it's not the editor's vision or the publisher's vision. The film script is a blueprint to an idea which is eventually going to become the director's vision.
Right.
Okay, so it's your film script is something, a manuscript or a book is something that a few thousand, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 are going to read. A film script is probably something that 200 people will read, if you are lucky. Maybe the actors are going to read it, the director and his team are going to read it, the production guy and his team are going to read it. That's it. Who else reads the film script? Nobody reads the film script. So it's a completely different, not to say it's easy. I think in some ways it's harder writing a film script because film scripts are now, especially now, are so bound by time that your film has to be 1.5. Your film has to be 2 hours long and not longer than that. It becomes such a constraint in terms of, the film script, the page of a film script is such precious real estate. You have to choose words so carefully to put in there, because three extra words, and you suddenly find you've got one extra page. So you've gone from 121 pages, 120 pages to 121 pages. And nobody wants to look at a 121-page manuscript. They want a 120-page manuscript. So I think there's a lot more pressure on time. The way we tell stories is also very different when it comes to manuscripts. You have to be faster. You have to sacrifice a lot more in a manuscript. You can't spend too much time setting up that world, which is why fantasy still, you've got Lord of the Rings and all, which are still 2.5 hour, 3 hour movies. But otherwise, an average thriller is 95 minutes long. And that's like an hour and a half. That's it. So you've got to be very fast in your storytelling. So one of the things I learned, and this is a good learning from the movie, and it helps me as a writer even when I write books, is that in films, what you do is you get into a scene as late as possible and you get out of a scene as soon as possible. Which means if you are showing a scene of a husband and wife having an argument while having dinner at a dining table, get into the scene. Don't start writing that scene where they walk into the room and lay the dining table and sit down and start eating, and then they have that argument. Get into the scene where the wife says, "Pass me some salt," and the husband just kind of pushes the salt shaker towards her. You've already got into that conflict point because you don't have time to waste. If you write the whole setup scene of how they sit down and how they're laying the table, it's all going to get chopped off and knocked off and nobody's going to see it. And you get out of the scene as soon as possible. The moment you're done with that scene, the objective of that scene has been met, get out of that scene, end of scene. So get as close to the objective of the scene as possible, get out of the scene as soon as that objective has been met. And I think it helps write scenes tighter. It's definitely helped me a lot, even in my books now. So you remove a lot of fluff, basically. So yes, it's a very different animal. It has its own challenges. In some ways, it's more difficult as well, because honestly, writing a manuscript, as I said, when you write a book, your editor will have something to say. You will have 4 beta readers who will have something to say, and you will have your publisher who might have something to say. But as long as all of you agree you have a book, A film script, everyone has something to say. So if there is a scene between your lead actor and your second lead, your lead actor will want it one way, your second lead would want it another way. Why? Because the lead actor wants the scene to be his scene. The lead actor wants the scene to be her scene. So what has happened is now that same scene, you have two people who are trying to turn it to suit them. And you've got the director who wants it to take it somewhere else. So it's just so much more difficult to accommodate so many points of view. It's so easy in a book, right? I just write the book, I listen to my editor. Sometimes the publisher doesn't even have a point. And then you just write it and that's it. It's out there. So it's in that sense, writing a book is a lot more liberating. But yeah, that's what it is. And this is what right now comes to the top of mind. Yeah, it is. It's more difficult, I would think so, but it's faster. It's a faster process. I can probably write, if I stopped writing books, I could probably write more screenplays, because as I said, a book could take up anywhere from 4 to 6 months of my time. Now, if I don't write a book, I could probably write 2 screenplays in that time and earn a lot more money. But yeah, I like writing books, and I'm a glutton for punishment, so here I am.
Yeah, so thank you so much. It was brilliant. Even Radhika has mentioned our director's vision. Thanks for clarifying. Really appreciate your answer. It was brilliant having you. I'm really sorry we cannot take all the answers. We have really overshot our time already. We cannot take all the questions because it will just go on. It was really very informative. We enjoyed talking to you. I'm sure all of them have a lot to take back after this session.
I hope you guys have had fun. I hope I've been able to share something of value to you.
Absolutely.
If I have not, just take back the one thing that I've got. Please go and write books, because I think once you do that, you will find all the value that you need. You don't need me. You just need your writing to tell you how valuable your writing is. So just do that.
And I'm definitely taking you up on that offer for that workshop. We will definitely think of and discuss that. I'll get in touch with you soon.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
God
much.
bless all of you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.